Hello and welcome back to another Deck Tech. I'm Zachary Chalcom, and this week we're looking at what is going to be a new segment on this channel, The Struggle. The Struggle looks at cards that haven't seen play or aren't seeing as much play as they should, or were kind of tossed aside as like bulk rares, and giving them a chance to kind of shine in the light. So this week, we're going to be looking at the Buffalord. The Buffalord was kind of like a joke card. It's a running on joke. Every set has another Buffalo in it. And this is just the culmination of all of that at the end. So with its diligence ability, it'll be able to summon any non-unique Buffalo. So at this moment, that just means not a Buffalord and any of the other 5 sharded Buffalo. The only other effect that it has, besides it spawning other 2/3s, is that for each Buffalo that it does summon, it will give all your Buffalo, so including the Buffalord, a different effect, depending on the shard type. Either Life Drain, Swift Strike, Rage 2, Flight, or Lethal. Arguably, that makes the Sapphire one the best, giving all of your Buffalo Flight, but the other ones are pretty useful, as well as just having more 2/3s. Essentially, if you can get this triggered once, assuming you can trigger this once, it's actually pretty worth it. A 4/6 worth of stats that could potentially continue to multiply is pretty decent. Which is why I'm at least trying to do this with the Buffalord. It does seem on its surface like a little bit underpowered. If this was on 3, it could be pretty good. It could be really good, actually, if it was on 3. But on 4, it's kind of pushing the boundaries of that. But to help with that, we're using Marshal Josephina to kind of help us get some time in there, as well as to cause one of our enemy's troops not to attack or block another turn, kind of buy us more time, and or just to get in with the Buffalord if it was the only troop that they had. Along with that, we're going to be running the outposts. We're going to be running one of the monastery, just a little bit different to give us a valor back. We could arguably run more of the monasteries or other outposts rather than Treacherous Pass, which is the second outpost we'll be running. Treacherous Pass has just been good against the Dreadlings deck. The beauty of the Buffalord is that it's shardless, so you could technically play this in any shard combination that you want. Just trying it in Diamond Sapphire for the moment, because it has other cards that lend itself to Diligence fairly well. But you could arguably do this in anything you wanted. So other cards that help with activating Diligence, or they have them Diligence themselves, in the case of Llama Herder, is Llama Herder, which you can exhaust one or more of your troops, and the Llama Herder gets +1/+1 for each exhausted troop. Lets us exhaust our Diligence troops. It also has Diligence itself to summon a Llama to help pump itself up, to also just go wide. You have Llamas will be 2/2s, so just having larger forces than your opponent over time can really help. Cosmic Calling is one of those cards that is kind of on the list of the struggle itself. It's in 2 different shards, which already makes it hard to place, especially since there isn't a great shard Diamond Sapphire. There we go. Diamond Sapphire deck right now, especially a troop-based one. You could arguably say there's like control ones you could play, but troop-based ones are pretty few and far between, and that's kind of what Cosmic Calling needs. It has Mobilize and lets you look at the top 3 and find a non-resource, and it gets mobilized. You put that into your hand, the remaining cards go into your deck. Then we're of course running Consult the Talons, because drawing 3 cards is awesome, and enabling our Diligence abilities is also awesome. Other Diligence-based troops that we're running is Exalted Professor, which will be running the defense diamond gem in it to just give some extra blocking to us. You could arguably run the flying gem as well. That could be helpful. but we want to get the Professor in, or at least exhausted as many times as we can, because we do want that random action to be in our hand that can give us more removal or a different option to go in case they keep removing our threats. We're also running Skittering Cultivator. We saw it in the Empress deck. It just gives a good threat, giving more Dreadlings every turn that can be pumped with, say, Commander Prompt. It just is a threat on its own. Then we're running Commander Prompt. Commander Prompt's been outperforming a lot of things. Anything that you're going wide, which we are with Dreadlings, other Buffalo, Llamas, etc., pretty useful. We're also then running Decree of Banishing. This is the only main decked removal that we have. We hopefully will get more from the Professor, but this one's a pretty good one, just voiding any troop that we want. And there isn't a ton of constant hate, at least in main decks, so you're pretty safe just using it, and that's as a removal spell. You'll have to watch it after reserves. They might bring something else in. We're also running Well of Purpose. Getting into our resources, it is the only Diamond Sapphire shard in Standard at the moment, and that does lead us to some of the choices that we make later. We couldn't run the human one. We didn't quite have enough humans. We couldn't run the Coyotl one. We didn't have enough quite Coyotls. So you could arguably try to fit in more humans and run the cobblestones as well if you would like to. We're also running coins and other slow shards. We're running a couple of the sapphire and diamond coins, as well as 2 Primal Prism, just to help us kind of maintain what thresholds we need. We're also running diamond and sapphire shards. Those are kind of obvious. Going on to the reserves, we're running Transmogrifade and another Treacherous Pass. The Treacherous Pass is in there for Dreadlings deck. We have 4 Transmogrifade just for the mid-range decks that we seem to keep running into nowadays, now that the format's starting to slow down a bit. So those are always good against anything that is kind of going mid-rangey. We also bring in some Martyrs, which will help pump up our troops, as well as counter some removal spells, especially like Hero Falls. Basically negates Hero Fall. Verdict of the Ancient Kings is a very versatile, useful card against control decks and other things that we need a cheap, easy answer to something that we're going to get blown out with. And then we're also running 2 kind of threats against potentially aggro decks, and in the case of Mad Romancer against a control deck, the Silvertown Adjudicator is kind of in there to help us against aggro decks and control decks. Drawing more cards, because the control deck would probably hold up stuff, is very useful. But gaining 5 life against an aggro deck can also be very useful. If we can trigger both, that's a ton okay. And we're also running Mad Robomancer with the actions when it enters the battlefield gym. And I usually run Flight, but you could arguably use whatever you want for the second one. And that's just useful for having just a continuous threat, especially against a control deck or something that's going to remove your threats all the time. Just something, hopefully the action that it gives you will be cheap enough that it can just like come in and you use it immediately and can get another replica and just keep going. And that's about it, all we have. So at the end of the article, or on the last video in this playlist and the wrap up, there will be what will be the next week's struggle deck suggestion, or at least the card suggestion, as well as there'll be links to the rest of my stuff. If you like what I do, you can always become a patron on my Patreon, or follow any of the social media that I am putting these out on. Those would be a ton of help if you can. And I've been Zachary Jalcom. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.